More ominously, the Germans were now deploying for defense and seemed more than capable of containing the Allied beachhead indefinitely. With the failure of the 6th Corps to make progress at Anzio, it was clear that the Gustav Line would have to be taken by frontal assault. The Abbey of Monte Cassino, although unoccupied, was regarded by many Allied commanders as the single most formidable position in the entire line. The plan for the Second Battle of Cassino called for the destruction of the abbey by a massive air bombardment and for the subsequent capture of the hill and of the town below it. The destruction of the abbey, however, proved to be a military blunder of the first magnitude. The operation had been hastily mounted, and no attempt had been made to coordinate the airstrike with the ground offensive. Predictably, the ruins were quickly occupied by the Germans, providing them with an almost unassailable position. When the attack on the abbey was finally launched, 2 days later, by the 4th Indian Division, it was repulsed with heavy casualties. The attack on the town was equally unsuccessful. After a difficult assault crossing of the lower Rapido, 2 companies of the 2nd New Zealand Division fought their way through the edge of the town to the railway station. But there, they were soon counterattacked by German Panzer Grenadiers. The fighting in the town lasted for only 1 day. The outnumbered New Zealanders lacked heavy weapons, and the failure of the Indian Division to take the abbey and the commanding heights rendered their position untenable, forcing them to withdraw. Although the Second Battle of Cassino had been a costly failure, plans and preparations were already being made for a third. Once again, this was preceded by a massive airstrike, this time obliterating what remained of the town. The bombardment lasted for 4 hours, yet remarkably, failed in its main aim of dislodging the defenders. Indeed, the rubble-strewn streets proved virtually impassable to tanks, and provided the German parachutists, who had taken over the defense of the town, with an even stronger redoubt. The Third Battle of Cassino was pressed for 8 days, from March the 15th to the 23rd, and was to end in yet another impasse. In one of the most savage engagements of World War II, the infantry of the 2nd New Zealand Division and units of the German 1st Parachute Division duelled at close quarters, contesting every mound and crater. Although many of their comrades had been killed and almost all their heavy weapons destroyed in the bombardment, the parachutists rallied brilliantly, fending off with mortars, machine guns and rifles every attempt by the New Zealanders to clear them out of the town. By the 5th day, they had effectively regained the initiative and had established a strong position west of the railway station. Mounting casualties, exhaustion, and growing frustration eventually brought the battle to a halt, but the fighting among the ruins was to continue sporadically for weeks as both sides attempted to consolidate or expand their positions. The failure of the Third Battle of Cassino finally convinced General Alexander that only a full-scale offensive against the Gustav Line could hope to succeed, and that General Clark was not the man to command the main attack. Accordingly, he stripped Fifth Army of its British and Commonwealth divisions and extended Eighth Army's sphere of operations to include the Cassino sector and the entrance to the Liri Valley. The attack would be launched on a broad front, spearheaded by 9 divisions of Eighth Army, and supported on the left by 4 French and 2 American divisions. Clark still retained operational responsibility for the 6th Corps at Anzio, which was reinforced by a further American division. 6th Corps was ordered to break out to the north when the main offensive was underway and cut off the German line of retreat. This was essentially the task for which 6th Corps had originally been put ashore 4 months earlier. The offensive opened on May the 11th, with a sustained artillery barrage by more than 2,000 guns. While 4 British divisions attacked across the Rapido into the Liri Valley, a Polish corps of 2 divisions attacked the Monte Cassino stronghold. The Poles were recent additions to 8th Army's frontline strength, and as well as being fresh, they were utterly fanatical and driven by an intense patriotism and hatred for the Germans. The Poles launched 2 offensives. The first made steady progress initially, but petered out in the face of bitter German resistance and fierce counterattacks. The second, mounted some days later, gained a key ridge west of the Abbey, threatening it with encirclement. Polish casualties by this time were frighteningly high, but the Poles were undeterred, either by their own losses or the ferocious fire that was directed at them from the Abbey and adjacent heights. That night, the Germans began withdrawing, and on the following day, the Poles raised a regimental pennant above the ruins of the Abbey, bringing to an end the 4th and last Battle of Cassino. While the Polish Corps was fighting at Cassino, the British in the Liri Valley and the Americans on the extreme left wing were making only slow progress. The British attack, although strongly supported by artillery, faced the same problems that had defeated the Americans in January, in particular, very heavy and accurate defensive fire. In the coastal sector, the American Second Corps, consisting of 2 fresh divisions, launched its attack out of the Garigliano bridgehead. But this sector of the front had been static for months, and the German defences were well organised. In the first few days of the battle, the Americans suffered heavy casualties, achieving only minor penetrations. In the mountains to the north, however, the French were making remarkable gains. On May the 13th, they had broken through surprisingly weak German defences and were soon rapidly pressing forward through terrain previously considered by the Germans to be virtually impassable. The French breakthrough and the capture of Monte Cassino by the Poles opened the way for the Americans and British respectively. The Americans resumed their advance cautiously, but encountered only light rearguards. The Germans facing them, isolated and in danger of being cut off by the French, had quietly disengaged and were now in full retreat